Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us on episode 178 of Blowback, Exposing Imperial Decline. I have my special every other Friday guest, Lynn. She is a historian and geopolitical analyst, and she is streaming live from Colorado, and I forget what city. It's not even a city. I know you're kind of in the country a little bit.
I live up in the mountains above Trinidad, Colorado. It's beautiful.
And I think it's about 11:30 a.m. there. It's about 9:30 a.m. here on the West Coast for me. And it's 10:30. It's only an hour difference. I thought, okay, it's an hour difference, Pacific and Mountain. So today's episode is entitled "The New Year." New Year, Old Delusions, Why the West Can't Understand Global Resistance. And so this is quite a broad topic. And I did want to, have Christine contextualize, what we're talking about here when we talk about old delusions. That would be my first question, Christine. What specific old delusions are we talking about that the West and the people here can't seem to get past?
I think it's very important to look at, because so many people ask the question, why does the United States and other Western countries continue as they do? Before I get into that, Billy Bob, I would, before we begin our entire discussion, I would just ask everyone watching this to remember, I think the death count now is at 27, with many more in the hospital. Remember all of the victims of the most recent atrocity, terrorist attack of the Ukrainians on the Kherson region of Russia. And it's just really been, I cannot stop thinking about it ever since it happened. I'm watching the news in the US last night, and at least the ones that I saw did not make a mention of it at the time, which really disturbs me. It's as if Russian lives don't matter, or I guess they want to conceal exactly what U.S. taxpayer money is going for, the murder of civilians. But right now, the death count is at 27. These were families. Children are among the deceased, who were celebrating New Year's. And right at the moment of the change of the new year, the Ukrainian drones struck them as they were celebrating at a New Year's gathering at a restaurant in Kherson. And I would just ask, and I only mention it because I don't see much coverage of it in the West, and I want everyone to remember that. And I think, frankly, it certainly relates to our topic today, because that old delusion is that and I generally think of the United States as an American, here, but all of the West is that military might and economic might, that type of bullying can exhaust a people into collapse. And the United States proceeds with this delusion that fear and threatening and hardship, or even promising people relief, is going to get them to comply and surrender and collapse. And despite decades of evidence, historical evidence to the contrary, the United States stays inside of that. And when I use the word delusion, I'm not talking about ignorance or madness. I am talking about the refusal of the Western countries, and primarily the United States and the UK, to abandon this belief that their military and economic might can make people give up on things that are far more important. They think that the that the dollar matters more than dignity and more than sovereignty. But when I think about history, we think about Vietnam, we think about Cuba, we think about Russia, we think about Venezuela now, even Iran. All of these places are not driven by money, but by a shared conviction of the people for their sovereignty and for their dignity. And I would say that the delusion is that the material, the dollar, overrides moral motivation. And they think people will trade their dignity and their sovereignty just to escape what the United States and what the Western countries want to inflict on them. Frankly, this entire society, this capitalistic society that we live in, believes that everyone has a price. And frankly, Billy Bob, in my life, that I see the most people do have a price. And but the fact is, this is projection, because people in other parts of the world who have suffered, who have endured, that's something Americans have not done. What they have done is a fraction of what other people in the world have gone through. And so they project this, and it's a delusion, because we have so many instances of them trying to do this in the world, and it's always failing. And I think that the reason why they don't reconsider their delusion and examine that is because there is no introspection to look at what these people's resistance is. And resistance comes from the people, not from their leadership. The leadership is coming from the people. And our leadership in this disgusting hegemonic government and country is also coming from the people. And so greed motivates them, while as in other countries, other things motivate them. So the US, instead of becoming introspective, which would mean to look at what your values are and right and wrong, instead they simply escalate. And that's the only way they know. These other leaders, I want you to think about Maduro recently, certainly Vladimir Putin. Even if you listen to Medvedev in Russia, his New Year's video for everybody, for the country, spoke of values and words that the West just doesn't use. When they do, it's maybe once a year, and it's shallow. But these people are deep. And I just think that all of the historical examples, whether we're looking at Vietnam or Cuba, the US should have learned its lesson, but that would be too painful to look at yourself. It's just like on the individual situation. Many of us have known people in our lives who never become introspective. Their ego controls them. And in this case, it's the collective ego of the United States, Americans, including the government. And they're not learning anything from history.
Agreed, Christine. I mean, and what you're describing, I kind of think of as a global class struggle. And the global class struggle today, manifests itself in the struggle against, and it's a Western-based imperialism. We don't live in a vacuum. We live in a reality that is the result of, history. And as a result of history and, the past, that's why things are like the way they are now. And the way they are now is that we have a Western imperialism, that is trying to, maintain its global hegemony. So it's a Western imperialism that is trying to impose itself, in these other countries, and that seems to be, successful sometimes, and then it ends up not being successful other times. But the delusion that the West can achieve this full spectrum dominance. That's what the Pentagon calls it. This global full spectrum dominance, where they control every government, every resource, every market. It is delusional. And I mean, it is definitely not going to succeed, but they keep trying. And we see that today. We see increased agitation, increased vigor, as they are trying now, to put a puppet government, in the most oil wealth country in the world, which is Venezuela. So no, I it's delusional, because they're not going to be able to do it, and they're going to cause a lot of, problems, both within their own country and obviously these countries they're attacking, and it's going to be unsuccessful. And so the bottom line is, they need to just figure out how to embrace multipolarism, and how to not be the just demanding to be the global hegemon. And so that's where they need to go. But it's like they can't do anything but continue this old imperialist approach to maintaining power on the planet. That's That's kind of my own way of saying kind of what you said. But let me ask you, I mean, what, some places they succeed, right? Syria, they succeeded, after decades, they got their ISIS, proxy force to be the actual government. It's just so bizarre. And I mean, like, people were saying for, ever since the very beginning of this fake, the color revolution they had over the Mideast, that, no, ISIS is, I mean, that one, Hillary Clinton was the Secretary of the State, and there was an email from her advisor. Man, these names aren't going to come to me, but he basically said, Al Qaeda is on our side in Syria, and it wasn't even a question. But nevertheless, you had all these Westerners thinking that the United States was in there attacking, to attack Al Qaeda. No, we're in there to defeat ISIS, because ISIS is bad. We're in there to defeat Al Qaeda. No. And I mean, and, so there was this debate among, citizens back then, and it was just so obvious the whole time who was right and who was wrong. And now that, the U.S. has actually installed their ISIS commander as the new head of state of Syria, it's like, you don't even, that conversation, nobody's saying my bad. I hope people are realizing that, hey, maybe I was wrong. Maybe I really need to rethink my analysis. I don't see that really happening. But obviously, we have some tremendous countries that are sacrificing and maintaining their resistance. So what is it that causes these countries to resist? What is it that motivates Cuba, Vietnam, Iran today, and Venezuela to resist? What are your thoughts about that, Christine?
Well, I feel that it is not ideological. Resistance doesn't just come from ideology. It really begins with love. And I would say it's love for their people, for their culture, their traditions, their land. It's their entire way of life. And I think that is also a miscalculation and misunderstanding of the West. They don't comprehend that. It's values, not ideology. When I think about Russia, they have magnificent remembrances, the historical memory of what they've gone through in their World War II sacrifice. They see their security as a moral duty. And so endurance is a virtue of their people. In Venezuela, we see the same thing. They have their Christian moral culture, but they also have like a dignity that in regards to the poor, and they see sovereignty as justice. Stalin, in his 1941 radio address, I remember he said, "Our cause is just." And I think that says it. In some of the Civil War speeches repeatedly, Lenin would talk about, and I'm simply paraphrasing, that the sacrifices, when people know what they're fighting for and they're fighting for their own cause, then they're going to resist. And I would focus on that value. It's in the people, and they know that it is a just cause because it's their cause. It's not the cause of all these big military corporations and the people invested in it making money. Vietnam didn't fragment despite all of the bombardment. The siege, Cuba didn't collapse, and Russia faced, that was the existential threat to Soviet Union. They didn't collapse. And I think that the West just continues to miscalculate because they think that hardship brings surrender, but these are people where it's the opposite. Hardship teaches people not to surrender. All of these societies share something I do not see in my society, and that really is a very deep love for their ancestors, for their children, for their way of life. Putin used the same word in his New Year's address the other day, talking about justice. But the fact is, these are values that the United States does not have. They don't. They may throw those words out and give lip service to it at times, but it's not. Even Mao, he had said, I think in a quote, and it's in 1937 in some of his writings, oppression gives rise to resistance. And Americans, even day-to-day Americans, do not understand that. They've never had that existential threat. They've never gone through the kind of suffering that other countries have done. And I would just have to say it comes from the values of a people, and the values of those people come from their historical past, which the U.S. has been shielded from. So, despite all of history showing this, when love is motivating a people, fear is not going to control them. And all of these leaders have shown that, past and present, and all of their people have shown that. And the United States just cannot relate to that. Again, it's not ideological. It's the values of the people.
And nevertheless, the United States keeps up its efforts. The embargo is maintained against North Korea. There's an embargo against Cuba. We're embargoing Venezuela now like never before. Why does the U.S. continue to do that, do you think? Even though, like with Cuba, for instance, and North Korea, like it hasn't worked, right? I mean, the government's still there. Why do they insist on, punishing these societies?
Well, they have to, they're projecting that these people are going to behave differently. Excuse me, except, as if doing the same thing over and over again is going to get a different result. And as I said earlier, to question it would mean to question themselves and their values, and they're not about to question hegemony. And that fundamental doesn't change. Yeah. It doesn't matter who is the president. It doesn't matter about Democrat or Republican. Every one of them share the idea that might makes right. And it doesn't. And they are being shown that in, I would say, far more examples than they have succeeded. And especially now at this time, when we take a look at Iran, we look at North Korea, I see all of this as very good, but they're not going to question it, because that would mean to question everything that the United States operates under. And we're in late stage capitalism at this time. What did Marx call late stage capitalism? It's going to be, man's estrangement from man. So they are so estranged from caring about human life. I go back to the atrocity that is just still on my mind that I shared at the beginning. I frankly blame the United States and the UK for everything, the evil atrocities and terrorism that the Ukraine does. But the United States isn't going to question that. And the American people, most of them, don't even identify the fact that they too are responsible. That is a collective responsibility, because they demand nothing more from their government. All they care about come election time is choosing Democrat or Republican, jump side to side based upon how much your groceries cost. They don't care about human life. That is because all of them, well, most of them, have accepted capitalism and this late stage capitalism. So they value the dollar, Billy Bob. That is all that they value, and they're not going to question that. These are not introspective people. The United States and its government does not care about right and wrong. And to do what you are suggesting would mean to start to look at their premise, and they're not going to do that. They simply want to bully.
Yeah, let's focus on this idea that, the guiding ethos, of Western imperialism, it is principleless. There are no principles. The only principle that everything is subordinate to is hegemony and control and power, right? I mean, that's it. And everything is for sale, because with that is, the capitalist system, and it's about profit. And so, they will, tap into anything that is popular and try and exploit it and profit from it, and turn it into something hollow and empty. Like that's, this is the distinction between what is guiding the West and, these countries that are resisting. It's like these countries that are resisting, they have something that is more important, more meaningful than this corrupt system of profit. But before that, my main thought was just to pause and give thanks and appreciation to these societies that have had to sacrifice and that are standing strong, decades later, and are really suffering, because the United States as a nation after World War II accounted for half of the global economy. So half the global economy was maintained by the United States. They were the world's industrial superpower, manufacturing superpower following World War II. Every other country was destroyed, and they only had like 5% of the population. And so with this huge disproportion of wealth and power, they were able to implement a global system where the US dollar is, of course, the reserve currency, but where they had the ability to develop countries that were, allies and that could be bulwarks and proxies against, the forces of democracy and humanity and the working class. And they also had the power to punish. They could declare an embargo and declare every country on earth better not trade with them, or you will, get overthrown, you will get sanctioned, you will get fined. We will use our global economic system to harm you. And if you don't want that, you better just leave Cuba alone. You better leave North Korea alone. And so, they had this power, why did they have this power, Christine? They had this power because of the sacrifice of the communists in World War II defeating fascists. And the fascists, I might add, that the West actually, created, armed, funded, and then unleashed on the Soviet Union and China. So the good fortune that the United States found itself in after World War II was not something they earned. It was an unearned privilege that it was earned in communist blood. And what they have done with that, that disproportion of wealth, power, and privilege that they did not earn is horrendous. Like, the Cold War and even up to the dismantling of the Soviet Union and now, it's been a very abuse of power. It's a tremendous abuse of power. And and it's just too bad because with that power, we could have really done some great things on this planet instead of just trying to maximize profit for this tiny elite oligarch class, which is what we did. So I think we need to appreciate these countries like North Korea, Cuba, that have sacrificed, and that I really think their future is bright, because I think that the inevitability of Western collapse, Western imperial collapse, I mean, it's inevitable. And when that happens, when they are no longer to maintain this global economic system where they can dictate who remains poor and underdeveloped and who gets to benefit, then they won't be able to coerce these other countries into not trading with North Korea and Cuba and Iran and Venezuela. And we kind of already see that happening. But the struggle is intensifying, and the struggle is militarizing. And, every day we see what this Western oligarchy is up to, what their strategies are, what their plans are. But we know they're going to fail. So I did want to, these sanctions, go ahead, Christine. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, that I just want to express my 100% agreement. All of us here should have the greatest respect and appreciation for all of these countries who have defied U.S. imperialism, and to their detriment and to their suffering, which is what we're talking about today. This is a concept, that the United States and Americans cannot comprehend, because they've never had to have that kind of suffering. But the defeat of the German fascists, yes, that is for the Soviet Union, for communist socialists. And it gave them, as you said, that springboard to do everything they did. And it brought to mind that at the time they thought they were going to be able to vanquish the Soviet Union and Russia at that time. And even when we go back into the 90s and the early 2000s, when Putin, fortunately, was able to have the presidency instead of Yeltsin. At that time in Russia, it was horrible. The United States, the CIA was dictating everything that was practically going on and had offices there in the Kremlin. It was just so much control, and they really underestimated. They had no idea that they were going to get a man who actually loved Russia and the Russian people and was going to put a stop to all of that. But our respect should be for all these countries. And when you spoke of North Korea, when we think of China and China's sacrifice during World War II against the Japanese, something that most Americans don't seem to have any grasp of, our appreciation needs to go to them. There's only one Korea, and that's North Korea. That other place is just the United States. And I would urge, and I know I digress a bit, but I think it's important that the American people, even people who seem to have more knowledge, not necessarily has studied it as much as myself or your or our audience, but there are Americans who are thinking along these lines. But even them will come up to me and say something. Yeah, well, look at Venezuela, your socialism, your communism, that completely failed. And they completely ignore what you said, the embargoes, the sanctions. What do you do when the greatest economic might on earth is sanctioning and making those embargoes and using their might to threaten other countries? They don't even acknowledge the evil of that. I want people, I did this yesterday, and it's beautiful. Again, a digression, but I think it's important. Go take a look at the North Korean New Year celebrations. It was spectacular. Go take a look at Xi Jinping's New Year's message and the celebrations in China. It's as if the United States thinks that they have the monopoly on everything in a developed society. Well, I can tell you, China and Russia, visit Moscow, is a far better society, and even in their celebrations for New Year's. So a digression, but it shows you what these countries have done. And your common American, your average American, knows nothing about the sacrifices of these countries and knows nothing about the wonderful technological and advancement in their societies compared to our own. But, you know, in terms of the sanctions and coercion that you talked about, nothing binds a people more together than, I would say, shared suffering or shared achievement, for that matter. But when a foreign power threatens such people, they will just coalesce. They're going to come. They will unite in self-defense. And I think that's the key here. All of these countries that we're talking about today and in our recent past operate on self-defense. And self-defense, there's no greater motivator than defending your family, than defending your culture, than defending your country. When that country represents you, doesn't represent some financial interest, but you feel it. You will fight and you will die for that. That is not the type of resistance you're going to see in the United States. They don't have that feeling and that unification. So, it's fundamentally different because of that. And they don't understand. The more you try to hurt people like this, they've already been there and done that. The more they are going to unify. And ultimately, as you said, Billy Bob, I feel they're going to prevail. Because in this last stage, capitalism, it's ultimately going to collapse. And it may completely collapse from within, little bit by little bit, not all at once. Does not have to be all at once and apocalyptic, but it will collapse, and that hegemony is going to be gone. And as you said, the multipolar world is the future. It is now, but I don't think that the United States is going to recognize it. I think it will have to fully collapse economically and all of what we consider society before something might come up from that. And even then, frankly, I wonder about the American people, the willful ignorance, the mass stupidity. I don't know. I think they're a soft, weak people. Not all of them, of course, but many of them are. And they cannot comprehend these peoples in these countries because they've never suffered like these people have. And they don't know about that unification. So they just, when you think about martyrdom, you think about resistance, justice, self-defense, all of these are righteous causes. And when you have a righteous cause, you are willing to fight and defend for it. The only thing people fight and defend over here is the dollar, and all they care about is making sure that they get their paycheck, and they'll do whatever they're told to do it. It's just so detached from humanity in this country.
I was gonna say, we're talking about the American people and their, their detachment from reality. I would just say, they have been victims of the greatest propaganda effort, to do just that in the history of the known universe. And I mean, this colossal effort to detach minds from the objective reality and get them to think in these idealized, nonsensical ways like, oh, this is a democracy, capitalism is freedom, it's the best system, this is just how it's supposed to be. Like, all of that, generation after generation, has really done a number on the minds, the mass consciousness. And it is so confused, corrupted, and detached from basic fundamental reality. And that is a problem. And that is going to be a problem that is going to be holding humanity back from the process that it otherwise could definitely achieve. If we didn't have such a backward masses in this most important and powerful country. But I think the other thing I wanted to say was, Putin and Xi, when we are looking at the big picture, the big geopolitical picture, they are not interested in a collapse of the United States. They are not even interested in a collapse of the global economic system. Right. They're interested in a reform, little by little, right? Like a little by little reform to a more better place. They don't want to collapse. That's not going to be good for anybody. And so they're tasked with managing this decline of the Western system, of Western imperialism, in such a way that, it does not have all these negative externalities where, mass poverty, starvation, a global economic collapse where the poor underdeveloped countries won't be able to access, food or energy, because this is a system. It's a global system. It's like connected by all these, trade routes and everything. And if those do collapse, like, there's going to be serious hardship in a lot of places. So we want to avoid that, but it's tough because ultimately it's up to the West. They can choose and pick the nature of their own decline. And so, that's the problem. Like, it's not up to Xi, it's not up to Putin. No, it is up to the West. But thank God, right, Christine? Thank God that Trump campaigned on ending the forever wars, and he's anti-establishment, right? So no, hey, here's the thing. Trump told me, Trump had the courtesy of telling me what I wanted to hear once in a speech. He understood. He had advisors that understood the lies I wanted to hear, and he actually said them. And to me, that gives him more credit than Kamala Harris, because his one opponent, it's just a duopoly. They both work for the same billionaires. But at least if Kamala was serious in winning, she should have at least lied to me like Trump did. Now, Trump talked out of both sides of his mouth, of course. And he lied to the warmongers and told the warmongers what they wanted to hear. But he also lied to me and told me what I wanted to hear. And I was optimistic. I was like, well, let's see what he's going to do. I mean, I wasn't really optimistic. I wasn't optimistic. But I was wishing that it was true, Okay, right. So let me ask you, what does Trump represent a change to the status quo? Is he
okay? Well, no, nothing fundamentally changed or will change under Trump, of course, because regardless. I think we're freezing there a little bit. Okay. Regardless of the president, the United States is still operating from its capitalistic, money-driven moral framework. That's its morality. And it is still projecting its values onto other people. Very well said in regards to Trump. He makes it up as he goes along. And I think many of his people and his MAGA people are seeing the reality of the evil of this man. I wanted to comment on a couple things you said. Of course, Russia, China does not want to see a full collapse of the United States, for example. And they are doing everything in order, they would welcome them in a split second into the multipolar world. But the fact is that requires respect for the sovereignty of other nations. And the United States is not going to do that. They're not going to. They wish everyone well. But they do not have aggression, but they have self-defense. But the United States is committing suicide. And I do believe that will most likely ultimately come. I have to say that people are going to start suffering finally in this country. We've never been invaded by a foreign force. People don't even grasp that. The power of propaganda, as you said, the amount of money that has gone into propagandizing the people here and in Europe and in Western Ukraine, straight from the United States and the CIA for Ukraine is tremendous. They have not given up on their fascism and their fascist dream against Russia. But people are going to start suffering now. You take a look at what's going on with the healthcare debate and the end of their subsidies. People are talking about groceries. We got a man as president in there who acts like the word groceries, I think, in April and November. He made references in a very bizarre way. Groceries, what? That's like a bag filled with food. Oh, it's an old fashioned word. He's so detached from people, and he doesn't care about people. He cares about the dollar. He was blessed in his life with abundant wealth, but he has let his success completely go to his head, to his ego. He has a monstrous ego. So, of course, nothing has changed in regards to it. But Americans, even when they debate it, like you said, the duopoly, that's all they're going to think about come the midterms. They don't question the core basis of what this country is operating under. And that is why I feel that the country will commit suicide. And again, it will be slowly and it will degrade. But everything, everybody, every human being here is commodified. That's all they look at us as at this stage in capitalism. They don't care about you and who you are. Workplaces aren't set up to care. There are exceptions, and they're beautiful to see. But as a whole, I would have to say that it is power that motivates people in America. And if they have a tiny bit of power and wear some uniform, they lord it over other people. If they're in Congress, if they're in the president's administration or this Department of War, all this evil, they lord it over everybody else, and they murder relentlessly as if there aren't going to be consequences. But I believe that there will be spiritual consequences, and those are going to be shown pragmatically, not only by their own internal collapse within, but never know what they may escalate to the degree that they might actually suffer some of what they have been doing to other countries. But the moral character of the United States is probably the lowest in the world. And frankly, I look at it as the biggest terrorist state in the world, responsible, as you said, for so much of the terrorism, and sit back and say, we got to fight these terrorists, even though we founded the group and funded it and all of that. So I don't think that there is the social cohesion in the United States that we see in other countries. And it would take a lot of suffering in this country before we'll see that social cohesion. We've seen it a couple times in history, but it was short-lived.
And, I want to just say that, this is the country that they created, and they wanted a lack of social cohesion because they feared social cohesion, because they feared a united working class that had the capacity, the political power to hold them accountable. And so, they have gone to work to make sure there's no cohesion. And this will not work in their interest, Christine. Like you're saying, this is not going to work in their interest when they start asking us to suffer, because we're not going to believe them, I hope, when they tell us that our suffering is China's fault, or when they say our suffering is Russia's fault. We're not going to believe them, and we're going to know for a fact that it's their policies that are causing this, and we're not going to put up with it. So, I mean, I'm a little bit optimistic in thinking that, they understand that they have to placate us, and they can't, they got to do a lot, and they got to, put a barrier to keep us from suffering, to a degree, because they fear what we will do, when we become unhappy. And they definitely want to keep us divided, but they also want to keep us placated and, focused on, sports, entertainment, and, everything that doesn't really revolve around political reality.
And patriotism. I'll add that. When I see Americans waving their flag, they wave the U.S. flag, they wave their Zionist Israeli flag, and they wave their Ukrainian flag, all in the name of being a patriotic American. It reminds me of, it's even reflected in our national anthems. I absolutely love the Russian Federation national anthem. I am so grateful that the music from Alexandrov was kept from our Soviet anthem. It's absolutely beautiful. I bring it up because every time I hear it or sing it, I am touched by the words. It is beautiful. It's singing about what you and I are talking about the endurance of the people and our ancestors, and the beauty of our country, of Russia. It really completely reflects everything we're talking about, the traditions of a people and their family and their ancestors. And I want to contrast that with the United States anthem. What does it celebrate? Victory on one night and a symbol that survived. That to me defines Americans. The very fact that that's the national anthem, it just shows you they focus upon a symbol, and Americans like their symbols. They just aren't going that depth. I don't have the optimism that you have. I think that this is too much a part of them in their very short history, that they have not developed a greater appreciation. In some parts of the country, especially in the South, I would say that they have a greater sense of the unity that we're talking about. They actually did suffer in a civil war, and I mean, both sides suffered, but nevertheless, they came together for, quote, what we're talking about, their way of life. I don't see that in the rest of the country. I really do not believe that even the suffering, I do think you are completely correct. The government, of course, wants to keep them placated, and they would fear the idea of cohesion, but I don't think they have much to worry about. People like to bitch all the time about the prices of things and about who's in office, but when it gets right down to it, they are complacent. And I just don't see it in most people to understand and question the fundamentals that your country operates under. And without that, it will just continue with different names, different parties, and people will complain. But oh well, like you said, go watch a football game and have a few. Nothing wrong with that, but it takes the place of thinking and introspection. And I just don't see the American people doing that. Maybe one day, but we are many decades away from that, Billy Bob. I firmly believe that this place will get far worse, and it's going to turn into a hell on earth before we're going to see anything approaching goodness that we see in these other nations.
Where to go with that? Like, there's a million directions. I want to focus a little bit on the American people and, the nature of their indoctrination, the nature of their divisions, the nature of, their inability to be cohesive. Right. And so, I'm a proponent of multiculturalism. I think it's great to have, people of all colors and all backgrounds, in society, and to, interact with them, and to, just have a melting pot, right? Like, to me, I idealize that. It's not a bad thing, but I recognize that, within the context that exists, where you have an oligarchic dictatorship, in control, the multiculturalism can be weaponized against the interests of the working class. And so they do that. They have this whole identity politics thing, where they try and I think maybe we spoke about this last Friday too, where they just divide people by all of these axes, race, religion, culture, liberal, conservative, sexual orientation. These are the axes that they divide people on, and it really it turns into the political reality that dominates people's minds instead of actual politics, right? It's like a faux politics, and you start just advocating for your own, identity group, or for policies that benefit your own identity group without respect, without caring about humanity as a whole, your society as a whole, or, the real fundamental politics of, hey, are we going to have things that are more important than profit and just running things in the interest of the obscenely wealthy? So it's just very it's very interesting to think about, the way in which, multiculturalism has been weaponized against us, and that it's something we need to overcome, right? We really need to overcome it if we're going to be able to have the political power necessary to make change and to force change and to hold these criminals, these pedophile criminals, accountable. And so it's our struggle. It's the struggle that we have. And yeah, I'm not optimistic because I just know the backwards indoctrinating and, what dominates the minds of most people, is totally detached from this fundamental reality that we're discussing.
Agreed. And they defend that which they have been indoctrinated with, even when you present the facts. The emotionalism takes over in the majority of Americans to defend it because they equate their identity with those lies and with those delusions and even the illusions about themselves. I have never liked the melting pot concept. Yes, I definitely appreciate different faiths, different ethnicities, and the coming together and building a strong society. But I don't like the idea of a melting pot where you lose the beautiful identity and traditions and what makes your peoples unique. You can join and we can unify, just like we see in Russia today. What is it, like 93 different ethnicities and many different faiths, and yet each of them are respected. So I've always been kind of turned off by the idea of a melting pot. I think of it as a stew. It all comes together beautifully and makes that cohesion, and something beautiful happens from it, and yet with the respect for the individual differences, because I think that is where that strength comes from. In terms of, there was something else you said there. I wanted to make the point also in regards to something you said about the billions of dollars that are being spent on all of their wars, their military actions. They're funding Taiwan, they're funding Ukraine, they're completely funding the demonic Zionist state. And yet at the same time, what we're talking about is the suffering is starting over here right now. And I think of a term that Ingalls used, which is completely describes what's going on in the United States, of social murder. And I love that term because it is 100% accurate. I really appreciate, and people should go and read Ingalls on social murder, because we have that all across right here domestically. While they send hundreds of billions of dollars for their military might and to fund and have their wars from which they profit, people in the United States right now, we're in winter, and people are dying all over the United States and will. Not just in a place like Alaska, but in Anchorage, they have quite a problem. In Los Angeles, how many homeless people are going to die from hypothermia? Every single year in the thousands that people die. That's social murder because it's entirely preventable by this country and by this government. But those lives are expendable. Same with healthcare. People are going to be dying. Why? Because of course this government rejects socialism. What is the simplest solution? Why don't you use those hundreds of billions of dollars, Trump, and pay for people's healthcare? Because in many other countries, a good number of countries, it works, but it's not working over here. Why come up with another system? Let people pay it and we'll give them the money. Too much money made by insurance companies. Well, other countries are not having this problem because they do accept the values, the good that is in socialism. And so, I think until people start to question these symbols, like I said, just like with the anthem, people in the United States cling to these symbols and their patriotism. They have equated their identity with all of this. And until they suffer, and maybe they will start to question that identity. But again, I'm not very hopeful about that, because my experience is even when you present them with the truth and they acknowledge the truth, they still do not want to give up the identity of being a patriotic American, my country, right or wrong. And that fundamentally is their spiritual fall, because if you don't care about what's right and wrong, and you only care about having enough for yourself, and you don't care about your brother and sister, you will ultimately fail. So I still see that that's what's going to happen. Propaganda, it is so much. I know that's so much of the reason, but I find that people reject the facts. They get angry at you, the messenger, for bringing them the facts. They will start to question, but I don't think that their solution, they will actually go to the correct solution.
Yeah, it's tough because, I'm not sure it's fair to say they don't care about right and wrong. A lot of them do. Of course that is true of some people, but some people are just, it's like their whole mindset has been shaped from cradle to grave, thinking in a certain way, and everybody is on the same page. And then they have they experience some random internet person like myself or you, and they just think that we're nuts, because it's like, it's unlike anything they've ever heard, and they already know what truth is. And so, it's just a mass confusion. It's a mass delusion. It's a mass psychosis. A mass detaching of minds from objective reality. It's when I ponder it, it's just so stimulating to think about. It's like unbelievable that people can be so confused on such a mass scale. Now, melting pot, you made a great point, and I do want to say my bad, because when you think of a melting pot, you're absolutely right. It seems like we lose our individuality, we lose our culture in this melting pot, and everything becomes the same. So yeah, that's a terrible analogy. I really do appreciate your analogy about the stew. That is good, because you retain your individuals into this beautiful creation, and so that's a much better way that I'll start using from now on. But absolutely correct. I stand corrected on that point.
Well, I think that in regards to what you just said, and their mass delusions, people lack the courage to not fit in with their clique, with their social group, with their church, with their family, with their neighborhood, with their country. They find it much easier. So I'm saying, we've discussed this before, the lack of critical thinking skills, but even those I see who can think, it is much easier to say, that makes me uncomfortable. And again, it goes back to the whole theme of our show today. They haven't developed that courage, that strength, that endurance, and even at the simplest level of just our opinions and expressing them, even if they feel or have learned something, they'll keep their mouth shut, because they sure don't want their family or the people in whatever social group they meet with and get together with to question them and their patriotism. And they are a weak people. They lack that courage. I would encourage everybody listening to us to be extremely bold. Whatever truth you understand, and the facts as you know it, please don't keep your mouth shut, whether it's on the internet with people, but in your personal life. It is imperative, if we're ever going to put a little bit, as you said, that questioning in them, is that each of us who do know, share it without fear of the repercussions, the social repercussions. Social repercussions are nothing compared to what the people of the world are going through because of what the United States empire inflicts upon them. So we've got it really easy. And if you think it's too hard to open up and tell the truth, for example, right now about Russia or Ukraine, or about North Korea and South Korea, if you haven't studied it, study it. But whichever area that Taiwan, and the truth about this, you should be speaking it. Don't let people just say something and it's easier not to cause waves. I mean, I see this during the holiday times. I see it year round. So if you know the truth, speak it, and don't be afraid of people shunning you, because that's what they do in this society. Don't be afraid of people gossiping about you. These things are so minor compared to standing with the truth.
And it's more important than ever, considering the context within which, we're living right now. And I expect, like you do, that, the Western powers are not going to go, allow incremental reforms into a better place, that they're going to, make some kind of a stand to maintain their hegemony. And that's when, they're going to start asking us to sacrifice tremendously. I mean, it's already started, right? It's already started. Like the Ukrainian people have been tasked with dying on the altar of Western imperialism. And so as it accelerates, it's just more and more important to not keep quiet, and to do whatever you can, to share truth. And so I think that's what we're doing, Christine. I think it's super important. And I think we need to normalize and mainstream it. We shouldn't, I don't want to pretend I'm an expert, right? I'm not an expert. I'm a working class person that has an interest. And I think all working class people have an interest in this, and they should all be informing themselves and speaking truth. And we need to hold these criminals accountable for their, immoral behavior and their reprehensible actions. And so, that's what needs to happen, and that's what we need to do. And it's a struggle. It's a struggle because, they have their resource, they have the wealth, they have the power, they own the platforms of mass communication. So, but we need to engage in that struggle. People should not, feel, like not capable. I don't want people to feel like, hey, I'm not capable. You don't have to be an expert. You don't have to have a PhD. You don't have to spend 8 years in university to just have common sense and spread that common sense. What else, Christine? Go ahead.
Yeah, I've heard from people who have done this, and I really encourage it. And friends of mine who have learned and do that in their churches, and with their families, and in the car, and whatever falsehood they're learning, they will just say, well, no, that's not true. And they begin to speak. And the more you do it, the more empowered you will feel. It doesn't take any kind of official quote, as you said, being some expert. No, it's a matter of, if you believe in the truth, then you're going to stand up for the truth and speak the truth, and understand that that's very powerful. Like you said, all of this counts. I would just say that as we watch what this country is doing right now with Ukraine and all the charade it's playing like it wants peace, when we watch what it's doing with Venezuela, the evil there, and all it's threatening and giving more weapons to Taiwan, these people are going to defy this U.S. imperialism. They will most certainly come together. And I go back to something beautiful that you said earlier, Billy Bob. Our appreciation, we find ourselves in this country. The good that we can do is to share the truth, and whatever platform we have, even if it's just with our social group or our neighbors or our family, we should use it, because you can't say the problems are so great, what can I do? You can do exactly with the opportunities given to you. Each of us are given opportunities all the time to share that truth. And I believe it is very powerful. It is necessary. And as we watch other people dying because of what the U.S. is doing, the least you can do is get a little bit of social disapproval for sharing the truth. It is actually very important. It is instrumental to whatever good will come for even those individual lives. Even if it doesn't affect this country as a whole, you're sharing the truth with one person might make a difference in the decisions they're going to make for their own life and for their family, and whether they want to remain in this country or they want to leave this place.
We're hitting up right on an hour, Christine. Do we Is that's a good place to end, but I don't want to force us to leave if we have more topics. That's my struggle.
I feel that we have covered it very well. I do believe that the delusion that the United States has, that their military and economic might is going to continue to maintain their hegemony, is going to fail. And as it fails, other countries are not exploiting that. They would welcome the United States to join the multipolar world. I don't think we're going to see that coming for a very long time, if ever. I do feel that the American people are going to suffer because of this late stage capitalism at this point. The best you can do is to think about your life, what is going to be best for your children, your family, your future. If you're a young person, do you want to remain in this place as it degrades and what it may come to ultimately one day? Or do you want to look at some of the other countries in this world, which I would really encourage? It's something that's been on my mind, Billy Bob, for a while, that I would encourage young people and parents, if you have young people, 17, 18, 19, 20, to encourage them. If you're one like myself and Billy Bob that sees this, maybe even encourage your children to start looking abroad. There are many different countries that you can go to that are very friendly and opening, easy to get visas in some of them, and work visas to perhaps start your life somewhere else. And if you're older, it's never too late to choose again.
So, as this escalates, I think that it's going to be more and more, enticing for people to get out of this country. I mean, that's probably a trend we're going to see. But I know we have promised to do every other Friday. Me and Christine will be here talking about this evolution and the changes that we're observing and commenting about. And so I expect it to get worse, like Christine is saying, because the U.S. has just not made a fundamental decision to live in peace with the rest of humanity. And so, but we will be watching and keeping tabs and commenting and sharing our truth every other Friday. And so, Christine, thank you so much for joining me this morning. And I will see you again the week after, not next Friday, but the week after that Friday.
You bet. I enjoyed it. You take care.
Okay. Bye, Christine. Thank you, everybody, for watching. We'll see you then.